Just last week, childcare providers spoke to Sioux Falls City Council members about addressing the issues facing childcare providers and families in the city. Well, the City Council is now looking into what their options might be there. Parker Brown has an update in our top story tonight. Parker.
Hey Brian, Sioux Falls City Council members continue to stay in contact with childcare providers to find a solution to the problems that are plaguing the childcare industry. Councilors are currently looking into a new job position that could be a new way forward.
Sioux Falls City Councilors have their work cut out for them. Providers are having difficulty offering competitive wages to hire or retain employees, and raising rates may price out many Sioux Falls families. This complex issue is something that City Councilor Rich McCorris is taking seriously.
If you have a daycare staffing issue, it's going to lead to a staffing issue in other industries. And so we need to find ways to help build up the role of our daycare workers, making sure people are aware that this is a really good profession. We need really good people going into the daycare world.
The early idea gaining some traction is an idea for a new job position. McCorris and fellow councilor Greg Neitzert are being tasked with writing up a job description for a child care coordinator. The position could be with the city or another organization, but they need to determine if it's the best way forward first.
We don't want to have a person shuffling paper. We need to really determine if bringing in a staff member of the city or somewhere else is going to have an impact on helping with some of the staff challenges in the child care industry, helping create the necessary spots available in our communities. Right now we're focused on what are the deliverables that a position could bring, and then also what are the specific duties.
There's more work to do, but conversations will be ongoing in hopes that a solution can be found, whether it comes from a new job posting or something else.
I think the big thing is we're exploring right now. And we always want to be real sensitive of just adding in staff if we don't know if the staff adding in a position is going to make a real impact. So that's what we've got to determine.
McCorris says that the job description will be presented in mid-February to the Regulatory Oversight Committee. From there, the committee will make a recommendation to the rest of the City Council. Brian?
All right, Parker, thank you.